Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Cup of Joy. I'm your host, Ariana Joy Christie, and I am so glad that you are here. This is a space to inspire, to learn, to grow, and to challenge. Get ready to fill your cup and spread a little joy along the way. Erin Junker, pediatric sleep consultant and founder of the Happy Sleep Company. Welcome to Your Cup of Joy.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Of course, I'm so happy to have you here. And for those of you listening who don't know about my relationship with Erin and I have known each other since I had the twins because she helped me with the sleep of all three of my littles, starting with the twins, and really changed my life, if we're being honest. So thank you, Erin, for everything you did for us, for giving my husband and I life back. And now I'm excited to share with all of you how Erin changed our life.
Amazing. Let's get into it. Yeah,
Yes.
and I love working with parents like you on two levels. I love working with all of our families, but on two levels. One, first time we worked together, you had twins. So
Yes.
that's obviously comes along with its own sets of challenges, both as a parent and as a sleep consultant. And so you have a unique situation in that you have twins and you need sleep. You've got two little babies who are the same age and who are not sleeping, right? So you really need sleep. And then when we work together with Callie, it's another different situation where it's like, okay, now you have older kids and you're dealing with all these new dynamics of like, how do you get good sleep for your baby when you're also trying to wrangle your toddlers at bedtime? So there's lots of different situations that came into play when we were working together, rather than I am a first time mom with one kid, which is a lot of our
Totally.
clients, which
Yeah.
again, they also need sleep too and love working with them. But, I
Yeah.
especially love when it's like, okay, this family really, really needs sleep.
They need help. Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because I think that when I had Callie, I was like, okay, I've already done it twice. So like I'll know what's gonna happen. And now I'm like, when it actually happened, I was like, I forget everything. I don't know how to do anything. Even
And not
like when it
only do
came
you
to
maybe
feeding.
forget, yeah, you
Yeah.
not only do you maybe forget, but it's also, even if you remembered everything, is this child going to respond the same way as your other children did? Like very often people will ask me like, oh, that's interesting what you do for a living. I guess you just work with first time parents who don't really know what they're doing. And I'm like, no, constantly we work with parents who are on their second or third baby because they come back to us and they say either A, I forget everything I did with my previous baby, or B, I remember it all, but this is a totally different baby. She is already showing us she's very different than her siblings in this way and that way. And her sleep is different. So I really don't think that it's going to be the same as it was before. And we want help again because we want to make sure we're really focusing on this individual child and what she might need differently than her siblings did.
Totally. We sometimes forget that every child is different and that even though you've done it before, like I had so many comments of, oh, you'll already know what to do. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I will. Like I totally believed that. And then I experienced it and I was like, I don't know anything. I forget everything. And I think
Right.
there's also an element of when you're in the thick of it, you're blacking out. You're putting things away in your mind and you're just like not thinking about it or listening to it, I guess, in your own brain. And so I forgot a lot of what went on. And when I
Yeah.
tried to remember, like, what do we do at this stage? I'm like, I don't even know. So there is a lot to say about that, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I want to start by getting a little bit of a background about what a sleep consultant is and how you got into this field of work, because I think it's so interesting and intriguing. Like I said, you changed our life, but how did you get there?
Yeah. I got there because my own baby didn't sleep. That's exactly
Oh,
how I got there. And I always joke that I'm not sure anybody could be a good sleep consultant if they hadn't once been a really exhausted parent.
that's
Because
fair. Yeah.
because I think with all of the experience that I have and the different scenarios I've worked with, that's all great. But if I hadn't been in the parents' shoes that I'm working with, I couldn't really relate on the level that they need. I
Totally.
couldn't, when they're looking at me with tears in their eyes on our initial consultation, telling me how exhausted they are. If I hadn't once been that exhausted, I might just be like, yeah, I get it. But do I? But I get it. I get it because I had a baby who didn't sleep. And then we went through sleep coaching and I had a baby who slept amazingly. So I could see both sides of it. And I'm like, I
Mhm.
want other parents to be able to experience this. So yeah, my background is actually in journalism and communications.
Huh.
But then I did a master's degree specifically focusing on health communications and how we communicate to people with regards to health challenges. And I think that really gave me a good background in terms of being able to communicate with families and hear the words they're saying in a language they're using to express the challenges that they're having with their baby's sleep. But it wasn't until my daughter was born, and like many parents, I was like, awesome, I'm a mom now and she's going to sleep like a baby. And then it turns out that sleeping like a baby actually means being awake a lot.
Yeah.
And we just really, really struggled. And about 6 months in, I was like, no, this can't be what this was supposed to look like. We can't function this way. We're still up so many times at night. She will only sleep in my arms and she will only sleep for 20 minutes at a time. We're all
Mhm.
exhausted. My husband and I were sort of at each other's throats because we were so tired. And I was just like, no, this needs to look different. There has to be a way to make this look different. And then we embarked on sleep coaching and we got her sleeping great. And then she started sleeping through the night and she started napping in her crib. And we were still having all these amazing daytime cuddles. But now it wasn't that I couldn't put her down. It was like
Mhm.
we can cuddle and have that. And then you can also go in your crib and have a nice long restful nap, which you need. And I can also have some me time to get my mental health back on track because
Totally.
I was struggling with that at this point. And
Mhm.
so it was amazing. And then I finished my mat leave and I went back to work. And I was like, I hate this. I hate that, I'm at the end of every day just like running in my heels to get to the daycare to get 5 extra minutes with my daughter. I would love to
Yeah.
work for myself and have the opportunity to just set my own hours. And I decide when I'm going to pick her up from daycare. And that's early a lot of days, or maybe she doesn't even need to go to daycare or whatever it might be. So
Mhm.
I started thinking about self employment. And at the time, right around the time I was looking for that, an opportunity came up to train and go back and learn as a sleep consultant. And my
Mm.
husband was actually the one who pushed me. I'm not a risk taker. And this was a huge risk. I had a full time, really well paying job with a pension and benefits and all that
Yeah.
great stuff. And I was like, why would I leave this? And my husband was like, because you don't like it and you are obsessed with baby sleep ever since we went through all this. And I think, like, why don't you just do it? At least do the training, at least take the courses and figure this out. And I did. And I started taking clients part-time and then realized, oh, there's a lot of people who need a lot of sleep. And this is
Mhm.
actually a viable business. And so then I started the Happy Sleep Company.
So incredible. That's
Yeah.
amazing, and I love that the whole mission was to support people similar to you that were going through the same things that you were going through, and something that I love that you said too is that you could still have the cuddles. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
people think that, like, it's so polar, like, either you sleep train or you don't, like, either you have contact naps or you really never do, and I think that's not actually the case, and there's this beautiful blend of both, and that's why I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because there are so many myths about sleep. And I felt so judged when we embarked on this journey of sleep training our twins. And again, yes, twins are like a whole different, like, I really was like in the thick of it. Like, I was just trying to survive. And when you think about, okay, if my baby is sleeping through the night, or sorry, feeding through the night, then you sleep in between those sessions. Well, with twins, it was like one would wake up to feed and then I put them down. And then the next would wake up and then I put them down. Like, it was like back and forth, like double, really, truly. And so it it does make a huge impact and huge difference, but the thing that I really want people to know is that it's not so black and white. It's not like, "Oh, I just let my baby cry and leave them." Like, people would say that to
Yeah.
me, "Oh, so you just
I
leave your
know.
baby?" And I'm like, "No, that is not what I do at all." And so there are so many different methods. There are names for so many different methods, but I love that you worked with us towards our goals, and it's not a one size fits all. Every baby is different and they need the support from their parents and their parents need the support from somebody. So,
Exactly. And
can
I
you
think with like you, I'm on a mission to help parents understand that it's not black and white and sleep coaching doesn't
Yeah.
have to be this situation where you just leave your baby alone in a crib to cry by themselves with no support. Oh my gosh. Like, right? It does
Like,
not.
you
Of course it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, can you maybe explain a little bit about breaking the myth of, like, you don't just put your baby in their crib and let them cry? Like, there is a gray spot here, and maybe just debunk that myth for us a little bit.
Yeah. And so there's two kind of things I would say about that. And one is what you said at the beginning, which is it doesn't mean you don't cuddle your baby anymore. And that's something I talk to parents about all the time because, of course, when I'm on a consultation with a new family, especially mom is often really nervous and she's saying, she often will say to me, I'm just going to miss the cuddles so much. And then my heart, I'm surprised like you can't see it breaking on Zoom on this
Yeah.
call with this family because I'm like, oh my gosh, no, you don't think that this is going to be you not cuddling your baby anymore, do you really? Let's talk
Mhm.
about that. Please don't think that sleep coaching means you don't cuddle your baby anymore, but let's look at it this way. And this is again where it comes from this personal experience where I loved cuddling my baby. What mom doesn't love cuddling their baby? But for me and for most of my clients, cuddling your baby is not just about cuddling your baby. Sometimes it is. And a lot of the time, when your baby doesn't sleep and won't sleep any way other than your arms, cuddling your baby becomes about just this desperate attempt to get your baby to go to sleep. And anybody who's in that situation, you know what I'm talking about, and you've been there. Yes, I love this cuddle, but I would also love to eat for the first time today. You know,
Yeah.
I'd like to brush my teeth. I'd like to do something with two arms, and I can't. It's literally not an option because my
Mhm.
baby will only sleep in my arms. So while cuddles are lovely, they also sometimes become this thing, and I'm going to use the word like we as moms sometimes start to resent this and
Mhm.
it's not positive anymore. It becomes this thing where it's like, I just want to put you down. And I would
Yeah.
just love to enjoy every second of the cuddles, but I'm not. Also,
Yeah.
as a breastfeeding mom, a previously breastfeeding mom. My daughter's 12 now, but I will talk to my breastfeeding clients because they will say, I'm just, I'm going to miss feeding her to sleep. And I'll say, okay, but let's look at it this way. You can like have your nice nap time routine. You can have your cuddles and your giggles and snuggle her while you're reading a book. And then you can put her in her crib and you can walk away and she's going to have a nice long restful nap. And then when she wakes up, you're going to still have that cuddly, lovely, snuggly breastfeed. But now, what I found on a personal level was again, when my baby would only go to sleep on my breast, some of our feeds were lovely and cuddly and giggly, and other feeds were me crying over top of my baby because her eyes were still open and I just needed her to go to sleep. And so it was
Yeah.
like, could you please just fall asleep on my breast right now? Because it's the only way you're going to sleep. And it's the only way I'm going to get any kind of break right now. And
Totally.
so that doesn't have a really positive impact necessarily on everyone's breastfeeding relationship or any kind of feeding relationship. Whereas to these moms, I will say, you know, now when your baby wakes up, you're just going to have this lovely, snuggly feed, and she's going to be looking at you, and you're going to be chatting with one another, and she's going to reach up and be like, you know how they do, like play with your face. And it's going to be
Yeah.
this gorgeous, interactive, lovely, snuggly feed every time, instead of sometimes it's that, and other times it's this not great feeling of, oh my gosh, I just need you to go to sleep right now. Right. So that's
Totally.
something to keep in mind, I think. And then when it comes to sleep coaching and strategies, yeah, like cry it out puts this whole bad reputation on sleep coaching. The whole idea of traditional old school cry it out, or as it's often referred to, extinction. And
Mm.
that method is you put your baby in the crib, you walk away and close the door, and you do not return. That is not my method. I can't speak for other sleep consultants, but I do know a lot of sleep consultants and I don't know many who are going with that method.
Yeah.
A, because it doesn't provide any support to a baby and it doesn't allow you to go check on them and make sure they're okay and make sure, do they need reassurance? Maybe they need a diaper change. The other
Yeah.
reason is people pay us for our services. And I'm pretty sure if somebody paid me for my services and then all I told them to do was put their baby in a crib and leave them alone to cry, they wouldn't be very happy with me. So we're here to provide parents a plan that is more than that because that's what
Mhm.
parents come to us for. So really often when you're talking about sleep coaching, with a sleep consultant or just these days where we're not generally talking about cry it out, we're either going to be talking about some kind of sit in the room method, which I think I use with all your babies,
Yeah.
or some kind of leaving and checking method. So with a
Yeah.
sit in the room method, we actually start off with a parent sitting in the room the entire time until the baby falls asleep at first, because this is such a new thing for this baby. An
Mhm.
example of where I would almost certainly use a sit in the room method would be if a family came to me who had only ever co-slept and now they would like their baby to start sleeping in the crib. And I'm like, okay, great, but that's a massive change for your baby. So what we're going to
Yeah.
do first is have you start by sitting in the room next to your baby's crib. And I'm going to walk you through what to do, what not to do, how to interact so that you're supporting, but you're not overstimulating and all that kind of stuff. But that's
Mhm.
what a sit in the room method would and could look like for those thinking sleep coaching is just leaving your baby alone in a room. no, you could actually be sitting 3 inches away from your baby, reassuring them.
Yeah.
Other families might be thinking like that sounds way too stimulating for my baby, or that's not even logistically possible for me. I'm a single
True.
mom. Maybe like I might be talking to a single mom who has a baby but a toddler, or a parent who isn't a single parent but their partner works a night shift and isn't available to help them in the evenings. Well, sitting in the room with your baby while your toddler runs amok throughout the house is not going to be an option for that family. So
Yeah.
this is where it's not one size fits all. Your family situation maybe doesn't allow for a sit in the room approach, but you would still like to get some sleep. And you would
Hmm.
still not like to leave your baby alone for huge extended periods of time without any support. So let's talk about a leaving and checking method. Let's talk about
Hmm.
how long you're comfortable leaving the room to go make sure you're supervising your toddler, but how long you're then going back in to check on your baby, reassure your baby, what that reassurance looks like, and how that whole method would work. So there are definitely different options, and they don't have to be you just leave and don't go back.
Hmm. And I think it's just so important to note that you're not leaving your baby alone. Your baby knows they are loved and they are gaining skills that are going to help them throughout their life. And I think something that we often like we look at things like eating and drinking water as like necessities, but we don't always look at sleep as that. But for both adults and babies, it's very, very true. And I know from my experience with my kids, they were so much happier on the days that they are sleeping,
Hmm.
and they function better, they learn better, like, their brains develop when they're sleeping. Sleep is very, very important, and so, to me, that's why it was so very important to get them sleeping and get them learning how to sleep without being on my breast.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think sometimes we have these expectations too, because we hear of horror stories of, sleep coaching not working for people, or I couldn't follow the method because, my kid was crying and I just needed to pick them up and my heart can't handle this and all of those things. Or it was so great. They slept through the night, the first night, and I never had to think about it again. And so those create unrealistic expectations on both ends. So how do we set realistic expectations for parents, especially in the early months, without feeling like super, super overwhelmed?
So early months, we gotta just really manage our expectations, right? Like
Mhm.
we at the Happy Sleep Company actually start working with children after 14 weeks. If after that point parents are looking for more formal sleep coaching, I don't even work with children under 14 weeks. And there's a reason. And it's because we are newborns. Like we are changing constantly. We maybe have colic, we maybe have reflux we're dealing with,
Mhm.
underdeveloped digestive systems. And that's the stuff we have to keep in mind as parents. Every day is so different. Your baby is changing so much. They're developing so rapidly. So in those first few months, it is so important to have really realistic expectations. And it's so hard when you're in the thick of it. Um, but it is that. It's that your baby might be one of those unicorn babies who does just only wake up once a night as a newborn, or they might wake up a lot. I very often have moms just reach out to me on Instagram in my DMs and say, my 8 week old is still waking up 3 times at night. Is that normal? 100%. It is. Is it easy? No. Is it normal?
Yeah.
Yes. So if all I can do for you is just, and sometimes that's all, I feel badly because I can't necessarily change that in an 8 week old. And I want
Mhm.
to. I always want to just help and fix it. But all I can do is tell that mom that's normal. But the amazing thing is that mom will just write back and say, just hearing you say that is helpful. You don't have to
Totally.
have a solution for me, but just hearing you say that makes me feel like I'm not doing something wrong. And that's
Mhm.
something I hear so often from moms. I think I'm doing this wrong, or I know I'm doing this wrong. You're not doing anything wrong for an 8 week old. It's not possible. If you are loving and feeding and housing your 8 week old, that's what you do. That's
Yeah.
your job. So you're doing everything right if you're doing that. Um, as we get a little bit older, I would say managing expectations is you need to give it time. So
Mhm.
if you are looking at sleep coaching with a child who is well out of the newborn stage and you've decided, okay, we got into some certain habits or routines during the newborn stage that we don't feel are sustainable anymore. We feel like our baby could be getting better sleep, but we don't know how. We're going to embark on sleep coaching. What should our expectations be? I would say you absolutely have to come up with a plan for what this is going to look like that you're comfortable with. And often
Mhm.
that it might involve working with a sleep consultant. That's why parents come to me, because they'll say, I do want to plan. I only want to do this once and I want to do it right. And I don't want to second guess myself whether I've picked the right approach or if I'm following the approach correctly. So I just want to work with someone who is going to help me through this with developing the plan, but then following it through step by step. But even if you're
Mhm.
not working with a sleep consultant and you are confident in coming up with a method or a plan on your own, great. but do that. Come up with that plan, talk through it with your partner, make sure you are both 100% on the same page, because the worst thing that happens is if you're not and you're second guessing one another and you're
Yeah.
questioning one another about your approach in the middle of it,
Yeah.
because consistency at that point is going to be absolutely the key. Picking your plan, sticking with your plan, and not saying, okay, well, last night was really hard, so we must have just picked the wrong plan. Let's pick a new one tonight. Last night was probably hard because night one of sleep coaching is often hard and it's something your baby
Yeah.
wasn't used to. So it's not necessarily that you've picked the wrong plan. And it's probably the last thing you should do is just change the whole thing and start something new tonight, because now we're not getting any consistency for your baby. And now your baby is getting confused about what to expect every time you put them in their crib. And that's
Mhm.
where more protest is going to come from, when your baby doesn't know what to expect. So pick a plan, stick with it, and then give it time. So we at the Happy Sleep Company work with families for 2 weeks, always. And it is because your baby at this point has had months to get used to one way of going to sleep. So we have to expect, in terms of managing expectations, we have to expect that this is going to take more than a couple of days to get good.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Totally.
give yourself time. Don't be impatient. Try to have patience with the process. Give yourself, say, this is my plan, and I am going to stick with this for a couple of weeks, 100%, so that I know, it was the right approach and we gave it a chance and we gave our baby time to adjust. And that is going to take a couple of weeks. Don't assume if things aren't perfect within a few days that it's not going to work. It's just that you probably need more time with it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to manage expectations is to really just like give yourself grace and time because
Yeah.
it is a whole new habit that this baby is going to learn and that you are going to learn too. I
Yeah.
found at least.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned people messaging you and sending you DMs and supporting people through social media. And I connect with that because when I had the twins, that was the only way that I connected with people. Was through social media. I didn't know anybody else that had twins or preemies or anything like that. And now almost 4 years later, I'm still finding connection through social media. And it's wild to say, but in motherhood, it's just so lonely. And when you can really find people who are at the same stage as you or who have been through this before, and these real life people, even though they're online, they can just give you so much support and just make motherhood not seem so lonely. So, how has the role of social media played an impact on your business? And also like your whole line of work because I know you're active on social media. It provides so much support for other people. I see it, you answering their questions and stuff like that. But yeah, through sleep and parenthood and your business, how has social media impacted that for you?
Social media is huge. I think it is for any business. And when you provide particularly a service and an information based service, social media can be huge. It can be really overwhelming because then, of course, you're providing a lot of free advice, but you're running a business. So you're trying to help
Yeah.
people. You're also trying to bring people to your account so that they will find you and you will, for those who do want to hire, you will create that awareness. But so it is really huge for that. Um, I think when I started out, I was worried that social media would actually have the opposite effect, and it is
Mm.
because of the myths and stereotypes around sleep coaching. So I was actually really nervous that at first I was just going to get a lot of people on social media who didn't agree with sleep coaching. And in my opinion, that's very often because they don't understand what sleep coaching can be, which we've already talked about. But for
Yeah.
whatever reason, there are a lot of people who don't agree with quote unquote sleep coaching or
Mhm.
whatever their perception of sleep coaching is. And I was worried I'd get a lot of just negativity. And I didn't want to deal with that. Like, I'm a business owner. I'm trying to do a great thing for people. I'm a mom. I have my own family. Like, I'm doing this to run a business and help people. I don't want to spend my days answering trolls on
Totally.
Instagram. But happily for me, and I know it's not the case for everyone, whether sleep consultants or otherwise on social media, um, it has not been the case for me. I do find that our followers on Instagram are there because they want to be there. They're there because they find the information helpful. And if they're not there, it's probably because they don't, again, believe in whatever their perception of sleep coaching and as
Yeah.
in is, and that's okay. I always say my sort of what I have a few lines that I always refer back to when it comes to the myths around sleep coaching. And one thing I always say is that sleep coaching is not for everybody, but a
Mm.
healthy sleep should be.
Huh. Love.
Okay, so get that
Yeah.
however is safe and healthy and happy and right for your family, and understand that for some people that is sleep coaching and for some people it is not. But happily, I do find that our followers agree, because if they're there, I'm not getting negative comments about sleep coaching. Those people seem to be going elsewhere. I'm only getting people who genuinely want help, have questions, appreciate the answers. And so for me, it's been a really, really positive experience.
Amazing. That's so
Hmm.
incredible, and I just think it's so amazing for, even someone who's not necessarily looking to hire a sleep coach, they can come to your page for support, for not feeling alone, for really understanding that they are not the only people who have a baby that doesn't sleep, because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you feel like, "Is it me? Am I the only one? Like, this
Yeah.
isn't happening to other people." So I just love that you also have created a community of people who can feel support from your page too.
Yeah, we also came up like during COVID when especially in the early days when I was just sitting around waiting to see what was going to happen in the world. I was like, I'm going to
Yeah.
sit down. I'm going to come up with some guides because I truly
Mm.
recognize that not everybody wants to do sleep coaching or not everybody feels that they need a sleep coach. They don't necessarily need one-on-one day by day support through the sleep coaching process. They've got it on their own. They've done their research, they think they have it figured out and they probably do and that's great. But they still have a ton of questions about my baby is this age. What time should they be waking up for the day? How long should their naps be? How long should they be awake between their naps? When do I know when it's the last nap of the day or bedtime? Which do I choose?
Yeah,
Tons of questions about these types of things. So I would have parents come to me and say, I I don't mind the idea of sleep coaching at all. I get that it works for some families. I even think we might embark on that at some point, but I haven't wrapped my head around the idea of not rocking my baby to sleep anymore. Even though it's causing me to be up 4 times at night rocking him back to sleep, I'm just not ready to take that leap yet.
Mhm.
So I'm not there, but can I ask you the following 25 questions about scheduling? Like I
Totally.
really have a ton of questions about his daytime schedule. Even though I'm rocking him to sleep, I would like to know when's the best time to rock him to sleep. How long should
Mhm.
he be awake before I start rocking him to sleep? And those kinds of questions. Or again, people who are like, hey, I already did sleep coaching for my baby on my own, found a method, worked for me. I think it went relatively well, but I'm having a lot of early wakes. I'm confused about what his bedtime should be. I have these
Mhm.
questions. And so for those people, I wanted to create guides that are just here is a document that will help you with that because I recognize that you either don't want or don't need formal sleep coaching and one-on-one support, but you need this level of support. So that was for those people too, because we found we were getting a lot of those questions on social media.
That's so smart and so amazing because I know, like you said, you take babies at 14 weeks. So in my head, I knew I could train them at 14 weeks. With Callie, we knew she was our last baby, and I was like, "I'm not ready." Like, I waited so much longer with Callie, I think
Yeah,
for like
yeah.
8 months, but I just wanted and I had the flexibility to take that time. Like, it was fine if I was tired. I was able to nap when she was napping because the kids were in, like, programming, the other 2. So, it depends on your situation, and there's no, like, expected time for you to have to do it, and I think that's also important to note, and in our situation, worked really well. And in that case too, like, it was helpful to have your guides of this is what wake windows should look like. This is the time that your kid should go to bed at this age because to be honest, I knew so little. Like, I was the first in my family to have babies. I didn't have anybody to look around to ask questions to, and I didn't even know how to put a baby down for a nap. Like, I remember when we had our first call with you and you're like, "Okay, so what time are the twins napping?" And I was like, "Are they supposed to go down for a nap?" Like, I don't know, whenever they fall asleep. Like, I really truly had no schedule and no idea of what a schedule looked like. So that does help to have those guidelines when you're just kind of easing into it at the beginning too.
Yeah. And you don't have to have a schedule. Like, I think that's just always so important to talk about because here's another line that I always say to families, but it's not just a line. I truly mean it. There's just a reason that I know it off the top of my head because I say it 10 times a day. And it is you do what works for you and your
Mhm.
family until or unless it doesn't work anymore. Because
Love
that's
that.
what you did. That's what
I
you did,
did.
right? Like, you had twins, and then you got to this point where you're very early, where you're like, I have twins. I'm a new mom. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not sleeping. I have 2 babies, same age, dealing with this. I'm ready for sleep coaching right away. I'm ready for more schedule and all these
Mhm,
things. And then with Callie, it was different. And so for
mhm.
any family, it might be that way. Like some families might be listening to this being like, well, why did you need a schedule? Well, maybe that listener doesn't need a schedule, but
Yeah,
you, as a
fair.
brand new mom of twins, was like, well, I'm ready for one. I need one. I
Yeah,
just don't know how to get there.
yeah.
So, I worked with, and it's one of my favorite stories that's an example of this. I'm in Ottawa. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada, but we were work with families all over the place. But I worked with a mom in Ottawa who I helped her sleep coach her oldest child when she was over 3 years old in a big kid bed.
Oh,
So we work with older kiddos too. And we worked together then. But the funny reason for that was because she had always co slept and she was still co sleeping. Her daughter was
wow.
just over 3 and she loved it, but she was pregnant and due with her next baby.
Ah.
And she told me, I actually really want to co sleep with my new baby. So, and I mean, this is not a conversation about co sleeping or like, I'm also a big proponent of like, you do what works for your family as long as it's
Mhm.
safe and healthy and you've talked to your pediatrician and all that good stuff. The point
Yeah.
of this is that she actually sleep coached her older child because she wasn't comfortable co sleeping with two kids in her bed. And she already knew that she wanted to co-sleep with her next baby. So she had to get the 3-year-old out of her bed in order to be able
Oh,
to co-sleep with a baby. So, it's just people do sleep coaching for different reasons because they're at different stages of life with at different stages of parenthood.
totally. And
Yeah.
everybody's situation is so different. So, yeah, you do have to do what works for you and what feels best, but that's so interesting and also so amazing. I love
Yeah,
that.
and then I also ended up sleep coaching that baby when he was 8 months old, because she was like, "Okay, now I'm at this totally different scenario where I co-slept with my first until she was 3, but now I have a second. I'm really exhausted. I'm dealing with a preschooler and a baby, and I don't wanna
Yeah.
co-sleep with him for as long as I did with her. I would like him to sleep in his crib so I have more time to do things in the day or deal or be with my preschooler while he naps in his crib instead of beside me on my bed." So we sleep coached him earlier because that was what worked for that individual parent in her new scenario.
Mhm. I love
Yeah.
that, and every scenario can be different. You're so right
Yeah.
because we
Even
did
for the
sleep
same
train the
people.
twins different. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. I wanna talk a little bit about self-care because the name of this podcast is Your Cup of Joy, and it was all about being centered around this mission to encourage people to practice in self care because I believe that when your cup is full, you show up as a better version of yourself, whether that is as a mom or a career person or friendships or relationships or anything. I truly, truly believe that. And a huge piece of this is sleep. And it's so funny because when we think about a sleep coach, we only immediately think about the baby or the child or whoever the sleep coaching human being.
Yeah.
And we don't think about the parent who is actually the person who's seeking out the help and the way that it can actually impact them. And so, can you speak a little bit about the importance of sleep for self care and actually for the parent?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We are better, more patient, more present parents when we are well
Mhm.
rested, no matter how we're getting that rest.
Totally.
And yes, so often clients will come to me or potential clients and they'll say, I want to have a chat with you. I'm thinking about sleep coaching my baby. And we'll get on the phone and we'll start talking. And so often mom will say to me, well, I don't want you to think I'm selfish. This is not about me. Like, I'm
Oh,
exhausted, but this isn't about me. This is just about my baby. Like, I can get by, I can be exhausted, but I see him exhausted. I see little dark circles under his eyes, and I want this for him. And my response is always, well, that's super lovely and really admirable that as his mom, you want him to get more sleep, but it's okay to want to get sleep for you too. This is, oh, it is okay for this to be about you and him. And at the
mhm.
end of the day, if you want to talk about it, I mean, as moms, everything we do is for our kids. So even
Of
getting
course.
sleep for yourself ends up being about your baby because
Yeah,
inevitably you're partially doing it just because you want to be a better parent for your baby. But
totally.
it's just this like guilt thing where I'm like, do I need to tell you that it's okay for you as a human being to want to get an essential need of life? Wow,
Literally.
that's where we're at here.
Mhm.
So this is huge. It's huge. I see I get emotional about this kind of stuff because I was that exhausted parent and because I deal with moms every single day who are like crying to me on Zoom calls because they're so exhausted, who are
Totally.
telling me that they miss their husband so desperately because they haven't slept in the same bed as him for a year, or they just have zero time with them because they spend all evening, both of them, back and forth trying to get the baby to go to sleep. And then I have parents tell me things literally like, "You saved our marriage." And I'm like, "You would never think that a sleep consultant could save a marriage," but that is
Mhm.
what people tell us all the time because they're like, "We were flailing. We
Yeah.
didn't know where we were. We didn't know who we are as people or as a couple. I didn't know. You have made me enjoy motherhood more. You have
Aw,
made me like being a mom for the first time." And it doesn't mean that the moms who are saying this didn't love being a mom and didn't love their baby before this, but they didn't like it on a day-to-day basis because
yeah.
they were exhausted. And it's hard to like your everyday when you are covered with a cloud of exhaustion. And then it's a lot
Mhm.
easier to enjoy your days when that cloud lifts and now you're not dealing with that heavy, heavy load of sleep deprivation. So it's huge. And it
Yeah.
allows you, I hear parents come back with feedback like, now that someone else can put our baby down and he doesn't have to go to sleep on one of us, and we're not the only people he'll go down for, we can go on a date and get like his aunt or uncle or grandma or whoever to come over and put him down for sleep.
Mhm.
Or if in the case of like a breastfeeding mom that I finished with last week, where she said, okay, I still need to feed him as part of his bedtime routine because he's only 7 months old and he won't take a bottle currently. Like this mom was struggling with getting her baby to take a bottle, but she's like, now I have all this freedom because even though he needs me for nutrition, he doesn't have to have my breast there for sleep. So I can just feed him and then hand him off to grandma and we go out for the whole rest of the evening and have dinner and whatever. And grandma does the rest of his routine and puts him in his crib because he's good at just going in his crib awake and falling asleep on his own. And this has created like a whole new life for me
So
and my
amazing.
husband. Or just
Mhm.
as a mom, like now during the day, he wakes up from his nap. I can give him the nutrition he needs. And then I can go out for the next 3 hours while a babysitter takes care of him. And I can get like a physio appointment or a massage or just go to the grocery store by myself.
Yes.
And these are
In
things that
peace.
I can now do because my baby has his own sleep skills and he relies on me for so much, but not for sleep per se, because he can do that on his own with some other loving, wonderful caregiver helping him with that.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
so true, and the impact on our relationship, like our romantic relationship is huge because in those early days, you really are in survival mode. Like, you're
Mhm.
not doing anything except trying to survive, and so that was huge for us. Like, we used to schedule date night after bedtime. So when the twins
Mhm.
went to bed at 6:30, like, in the summertime, we could still golf 9 holes and have dinner
That's
after their
amazing.
bedtime. Like, it
Yeah.
was the most incredible thing. I remember the first time we did it, and I was like, is this our life now? Like, we just had uninterrupted time together and we didn't have to worry because our children are literally sleeping.
And
Like,
that's
it's
the great part
just
too. Like when your children
life-changing.
don't sleep well, you can leave them with someone, but let's face it, we all spend the entire time that we're out for dinner or golfing stressing that
Worrying,
the
yeah.
babysitter is having a time. Right.
Yep,
Like the baby's up and what's going on with the babysitter. I'm sure the baby's screaming and the babysitter's just wandering around the house trying to bounce them to sleep. Or it's, 10 o'clock and baby's probably having their first waking. I wonder what's going on with grandma. Instead, you're
totally.
just like, bye. There's no reason whatsoever you should have any issues. Go watch Netflix and my baby's going to sleep and I'm not even going to stress about it because he always sleeps and he sleeps well. And that just takes,
Yeah.
you not only get to go out, but you get to go out pretty stress free, which is so lovely as a new parent.
Totally. It's huge and so impactful. Um, so speaking about self-care, you are a mom and a business owner. You are helping people get sleep. You're learning all about their stories. A lot of it is filled with emotions, I am sure. So, how is your or what is your favorite way to practice self-care? And is it something that you prioritize? Is this something that you make sure to do?
I'm bad.
I know it's a hard question.
It is a hard question and I'm bad at prioritizing it. I think my biggest form of self-care is spending time with friends. Because
Love.
it's just like this, it fills your cup, right? Like it
Mhm.
just, you prioritize your friends, you get out of the house, you get into it. Especially for me, I work from home full time. All of our stuff is done virtually. So I work from home all the time. So getting out of the house and seeing the people you love and
Yeah.
catching up with them. And then it feels good for them too. And as women, there's always like, there's memes about it. We all know it's true that we
Yeah.
put it off and put it off. And, there's jokes about like 80-year-old women, like, oh, the first time I saw my friend after we said we'd get together for coffee next week, but now we're 80 and we finally made it happen. Like, I don't
Totally.
want that to happen with my friendships. I also think, I come from a different perspective than a lot of my clients because I am now like, I have a 12-year-old. I'm 42.
Totally.
So I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 10 years, but I have a 12-year-old. And so I see now, I can't even believe I'm going to say this out loud, but my child is probably going to move out of home in 5 to 6 years
Oh.
from now.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, I'm just sitting over here like massaging my broken heart, even talking about that. But then on the other hand, as a human being who is a separate entity from my child, I'm also starting to think about what does my life look like when I'm not a mom 24/7. I mean, I'll always be
Mhm.
a mom 24/7, but
Yeah.
when my daughter's gone, and what have I left for myself in terms of relationships and friendships? Did I prioritize my friendships and relationships enough while I was, full-time momming, such that I still
Mhm.
have them when she's gone, because I still want to have those relationships and have a fulfilled life when my daughter is out being an adult and fulfilling her own. And so that's something I really prioritize. And only very recently have I started to prioritize therapy.
Mm.
I
Love.
went, I'll say, undiagnosed with PPD, PPA when my daughter was young. I am 100% certain that if I had ever actually spoken to anyone about it, they would have been like, yes, like, you have
Yeah.
postpartum depression. This is like, there's no question. This is what you're dealing with, but I didn't deal with it. And of course, through what I do now, and because I have my own podcast and I talk to experts about this kind of stuff all the time, I can see it even more. I'm like, yes, 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 that is exactly what I was going through. And you also
Mhm.
see that we talk about moms only experiencing PPD in the first like 6 to 12 months. PPD most often goes on way longer than that. And I would
Yeah.
say I did not start finding myself, my new self, or my old self, or any of those things truly, and feeling like I knew who I was again as a person, until I'd been a mom for about 5 years.
Wow.
That's a long time to
Yeah.
go without really feeling like you have any freaking idea who you are. And so I loved being a mom. I'm obsessed with my daughter. We have the most amazing relationship. She's an only child, so we do a lot of stuff together.
Aw.
But she was about 5 when I started to be like, okay, I feel like a human again. I feel like I'm starting to know who I am again, or who the new me is. But it took a long time. And I'm really confident that with therapy, if I'd actually prioritized it and just made the commitment and gone and found the right person for me, that could have happened a lot sooner. And so I'm a huge proponent of that. And I have different relationships and partnerships with counselors in the area and just elsewhere, so that when clients tell me this is something I'm struggling with, I have resources for them, because it's huge. It's huge and it
Huge.
needs
Yeah.
to be prioritized. And it's so hard to prioritize it. And I know that the reason I didn't prioritize it when my own daughter was, say, under a year, is I just felt too overwhelmed. I was like, it'll just make it worse if I try to leave her and prioritize going to counseling. Then I'll just be stressed the whole time I'm there, because she's, not napping, or she's crying, and that just spikes my PPD anyway. So I'd rather just be with her and keep her from crying, so I don't have to worry about it. And these reasons we come up with for not going, that really, just if you can prioritize it, it's huge.
Totally. And thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's so difficult to talk about too. But I think even you saying that, like, I feel like in my mind, and I know that that can last, beyond 6 or 12 months, but everybody tells you that no, it's just those early times. And it's so difficult when you haven't sought out help to even like verbalize that or think like, "Oh yeah, that's a reality." Like it's so much easier to be like, "No, it's fine. I was just sad." Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I just had a bad day. It's totally fine." Like,
Yeah.
no, these things actually need to be worked on and talked about. And even with physical things too, like I remember my midwife and my OB saying like, "You have to go see a chiropractor," and me looking at my husband and being like, "It's impossible.
Yeah. When would I
I
find time for
I
that?
literally can't." Yeah, unless you're gonna physically come with me and watch both the babies while I go through that, but if I hear them cry, I'm definitely gonna stop and make
Right.
them like, I'm going home. It's so silly that we can't prioritize our own health, both mental and physical, um, and that we have such a hard time even saying like, "I'm struggling."
Hmm.
My kids will be 4 in February, and I still feel like I'm in the early days postpartum sometimes.
Yeah,
And
and I did too at that age. I did,
it's
and,
cra
like, crying was still massively triggering for me at that age, where it wasn't for other parents, and you get into this, like, "Why do I feel this way about it?" When other parents seem to just be like, "Oh, well, they're 4, they're having a tantrum, whatever," and for me, it was like, no, it was like a physical reaction
my
to her
whole
crying
body.
still, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes when I'm then getting overwhelmed or anxious or I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do," my husband sometimes even will be like, "It's fine. Like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't know. What is wrong with you? Like, somebody tell me, please. I'd
It's
like to
also really
know."
hard if you happen to be married to one of the chillest people on the planet, and I don't know about Mike, but
Literally.
yeah. So I'm like, "Cool, so you're just sitting over there with your lack of anxiety, like, watching TV. How's that? How is that for you? Like, that looks fun. I wish I could do that." And it's not because he
Literally.
doesn't care. It's not
No.
because he doesn't care. We're just very different people. And he is
Yeah.
the chillest person on the planet. And he's like, everything will be fine. It'll all work out fine. And shockingly, it always does. But I
Yeah.
can't see that when I'm in the thick of an anxious
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it took me a really long time. And much like moms who reach out to me who feel like, well, I'm only doing this because of my child. And I'm kind of like, well, you're allowed to do it for you too. When I
Mhm.
finally started seeking therapy like, well, a huge part of it, and going back to like this full circle conversation, a huge part of it was being involved in social media, having a podcast, and talking to so many therapists, relationship experts,
Mm.
and finally drilling it into my own brain like, this is helpful. This could be
Yeah.
amazing for you, even though you're well past that, stage of having that young child. I'm dealing with a whole other host of things now as a mom. My child is preteen.
Mhm.
There's a whole other host of things that come along with that, feelings that she has, feelings that I have, trying to manage our relationship in a way that I feel like I'm being helpful to her. But of course,
Mm.
she's preteen. There's like more
Yeah.
combativeness in our relationship than there used to be. And I want to manage that in a really healthy and positive way and understand that it's normal, even though it's really hard. It's normal for there to be that combativeness in our relationship, but let's get to the other side of it, still loving each other as much as we always have and having this amazing,
Yeah.
secure, attached relationship that we've always had. And it's not going to be sunshine and roses every day, but so for me, having strategies for dealing with my own emotions when she says or does something that's triggering as a preteen,
Mhm.
and then also strategies for words and language to use with her when she's going through big, strong emotions, which she's going through because she's 12,
Yeah.
so it's been super helpful. But even then, it was, my biggest catalyst for reaching out was because I was like, well, I want to be a good mom for her. And I'm at
Oh.
a stage in our relationship where so much has changed compared to when she was just wee, that now I need more help. I need strategies. And so I'm going to do this for her. And then the only in realizing that was I kind of like, I'm doing what my clients do. Like, this can be for me too. I can talk about
Yeah.
stuff that's just about me as a person because I'm a person too.
Yeah. And what a
Yeah.
good tangible example of how actually practicing self-care helped you show up better for her.
Yeah,
And
for
I'm sure for
sure.
your other relationships too. Like when you are happier, everything turns out better,
Yeah.
in
It's
all
so true.
areas of life. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's actually
Yeah.
incredible. And I hope that encourages anybody who is struggling to really take action and reach out to somebody. You know what I
Me
mean?
too. Me too.
Um, so I want to talk a little bit about situations of sleep and what you would do.
Yeah.
I put a little question
Oh,
box on
yeah.
my Instagram of some sleep questions, and I also have a question too because we haven't
Okay.
chatted in a long time, and I feel like I've gotten to a good place of, we have our bedtime routine. This is the way that we do sleep, but I'm at a big transition period. So all
Okay.
three of my kids have gone to programming now. This is the
Yeah.
first time ever that that's happened. We're on day 4, so
And the
big things
boys
over here.
are the boys are still in daycare. They're not in school yet.
Right, they're actually in the JK class at their Montessori school, but they are not of the age of JK yet because
Okay.
they have an early birthday. So,
Okay.
yeah, still young, they're not even 4. So, managing 3, obviously difficult, but managing the transition, much more difficult. So, 1 is napping still, but at school, her nap is much shorter. So, we're moving bedtime up because the school year is here. They need this sleep in the summertime. They would nap long because they're at home, and now it's much shorter. So we're kind of changing our like bedtime a little bit. Twins aren't napping at school. There's no opportunity for nap at school. So on weekends they nap, but on weekdays they don't. So again, weekdays they're having a bit of an earlier bedtime too. But then it kind of falls where Callie and the twins are having bedtime around the same time, but I'm still nursing Callie. So I still
Hmm.
need like 20 to 30 minutes of time to actually like sit with her and nurse while also trying to get the twins to bed, and they still need support and help. So managing bedtime alone is very, very difficult. Are there particular sleep tips that you would give to moms who are balancing multiple kids or responsibilities? Because I'm
Yes.
feeling like I'm in the weeds a lot of the
I
time.
know. And I mean, it's a stage, right? It's a stage for
Yeah.
sure. And as you know, it's not going to last forever, but that doesn't help you right now. But actually, I get this question so often that I do have a podcast episode with someone named
Mm,
Katie Sproul, and she has 3 little kids, and her husband's a doctor. So he's often not around at bedtime because he's on a shift. And so we had a whole episode about managing multiple kids at bedtime.
amazing.
So that's a good one to
I
listen
will
to. But
listen.
some of
Yeah.
her biggest tips were like, prepping in advance during the day when you do have a chance, just like prepping the bedtime stuff, depending on your kids' ages and how much you need to prep. Obviously getting help whenever you can, but that's not an option for everybody. And then throwing some of the rules that you may have learned in infancy out the window. So this was a hard one for me to admit to, because I'm all about the bath all the time. I'm the bath queen. I'm like, give your kids a bath every night as the start of their bedtime routine. It's such a good cue for them. It helps them understand the day is over and the night's beginning. Playtime's over. It's just about bedtime now. However, I'm also a realistic human being. And if you have 3 kids under the age of 4, you're not doing a bath every night. So stuff
Yeah.
like that, like cut the stuff that you can. If you have kids who are good sleepers and have a really good foundation for good routines in place, it's not going to be the end of the world if you like cut the bath every once in a while, because tonight is
Yeah.
just busy. Mommy's on her own. I've got 3 kiddos to deal with. We're not having a bath tonight. So if you're someone who's stressing about that kind of thing, I would cut that on a lot of nights and just give your kids a quick little wipe down, put them in their jammies, read them their story, and then they go to bed, just to move things
Mhm.
along a little bit.
Yeah.
As a sleep consultant, one of the tips I always give parents is to, if you're struggling with getting them all to bed at the same time and it's just not going to be possible, like one of them, or in your case, 2 of them, are going to have to go to bed at a different time than the other one. You can't get the whole routine for all 3 done at the exact same time and get them all in bed at the same time. Prioritize the bedtime of the youngest child, is my
Okay.
tip, because they are
Okay.
the least resilient to being overtired.
Hmm.
So, especially if I'm working with a family who has a baby and a 3-year-old, I'll say if their bedtimes happen to fall around the same time because of whatever their current napping scenario is or isn't, then your 6-month-old is going to be a way more difficult situation to handle if she's an hour overtired because you prioritized the 3-year-old's bedtime being exactly on time. And
Yeah.
it's likely that your 3-year-old is going to be able to handle it a bit more if you have him sit down, even if it's in the hallway because you need to see him while you deal with the baby in the bathroom, giving her a little wipe down or whatever. Sit him down with a book or a puzzle or whatever and let him just do that, and let his bedtime be half an hour later than it normally is tonight, because your partner's away and you got to deal with the baby and they're getting super cranky and fussy, and he's going to be okay if it's just his bedtime is 30 minutes later than normal tonight. So I usually prioritize the bedtime of the youngest one if I have to choose.
Okay, so it can be a bit more flexible with the older
Yeah.
too. Amazing. A question that came up a lot is about toddler sleep. So we talk so much about baby sleep when we talk about sleep coaching, but we've actually had some of this where now our twins used to be like the best sleepers. 7 o'clock bedtime, 7 o'clock wake up. Like they weren't out of their bedrooms before 7 o'clock. Now that they're sleeping in big boy beds and they're
Hmm.
not having their nap, they're up at 5.
Yeah.
Sometimes 6 if we're lucky, but 5 is like the new 7 o'clock, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
So and it takes much longer for them to fall asleep too. So, even some people mention that their toddlers and children won't fall asleep without them being in their bed with them. So, toddler sleep, what do we do?
There's so much with toddler sleep. And so
Yeah.
when I say toddler, I will say, I love for children to sleep in a crib until like minimum 2.5. And I think the boys were over that. You think the boys were like 3 plus when you,
Oh, yeah,
were
they
they?
just transitioned, like,
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, and they're
And I was
three and
so
a half.
proud of you. I saw it. I
Yeah.
saw it on Instagram and I was like, yay, Ariana, you didn't transition them early. And if you did transition your children before this, no judgment. I'm just saying, in my
Mhm.
experience, children transition to a big kid bed more smoothly if they're closer to the age of 3 or even beyond, because
Yeah.
the higher their comprehension level is, their verbal communication skills, their reasoning skills, once you put them in a big kid bed that they can get in and out of, it's better if,
Yeah.
all of that is higher. So the older they get, the higher all that gets. So let's wait until 3 or beyond to move them to a big kid bed. Tip number
Love
1.
that.
If they're younger and still in a crib, then there's just different strategies we can use if they're, yelling out when you leave the room. But if they can physically get out of their bed and run into your bedroom, it's a whole other strategy that we have to use to deal with this. So,
Mhm.
2 main things I would say, and then we'll get into the lying with your child to fall asleep, because that's kind of another thing. But if your child isn't, if you don't need to lie with your child to fall asleep, they will still fall asleep independently, but they're taking a ton of time to fall asleep, or they're waking up super early to start the day, and they're kind of over 3 years old. Really look at what's kind of scheduling you're doing, because what I commonly see, and you're going to be like, Erin, do not tell me that my children don't need a nap anymore. But I might tell you that your children don't need a nap anymore. So if a
Right.
child is well over the age of 3, so especially like 3.5 plus,
Mhm.
and they still nap some or all days, and you're seeing a lot of consistency with them having trouble falling asleep at bed, like on a pretty consistent basis, they take an hour or more to fall asleep at bedtime, they probably don't need a nap anymore. They probably need
Yeah.
no nap and a consistently earlier bedtime. Because for most 3.5 year olds, if they are still napping for an hour and a half in the middle of the day, I'll put them to bed at like 7:45, 8 o'clock, which might sound late, but they're older now. And if they're still napping, they need a later bedtime or they're not going to be tired
Yeah.
enough. Like a 3.5 year old who's napping an hour and a half is not going to be tired enough to go to bed at 7, unless you have an anomaly child. Some will, most will not.
Uh-huh.
So they need a later bedtime. If your 3.5+ year old is napping for an hour in the day and you put them to bed at 7:45, 8 o'clock, and they still won't go to sleep for an hour, you need to drop the nap, would be my
Okay.
advice. Like they're done. Most children are
Yeah.
done napping, ready to be done napping between 3 and 4. And if they are still napping, they won't fall asleep at bedtime, and then they're exhausted the next day because they didn't go to bed till 10 p.m. So then they'll nap again, but then they won't go to bed till 10 p.m. again, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. So
Hmm.
really look at the scheduling, because also then going to bed overtired. So this is the other side of it. Some parents have dropped their child's nap, so their 3.5 year old doesn't nap anymore, but they're still going to bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Now we have
Yeah.
a 3.5 year old who's going to bed overtired. So
Yeah.
I would suggest that we should be going to bed at more like 6:30, latest 7 o'clock, if we're
Yeah.
between 3 and 4 and we've dropped our nap already, or at this point. So if you're doing more like 7:30, 8 o'clock for a 3-year-old who's not napping, they're overtired, and overtiredness will cause early morning wake ups. So if you're experiencing early morning wake ups and that scenario sounds like you, that might be what's going on, is that you might need an earlier bedtime for your non-napping 3-year-old.
I think that's what I
Is that
need.
all? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like your kiddos probably need to drop their nap altogether and do an
Yeah.
earlier bedtime, would be what I would say. Yeah.
I
And
think you're
and we can
right.
talk about this offline, and you can send me some sleep tracking logs if you
You're
want
the best.
to.
Okay. Deal. Another one that we got is short naps. So there were a couple people around the 5 to 6, maybe 7 month mark who only are napping like 30 minutes, like a cat nap. How do we lengthen this?
So, two big things, and this is with a lot of sleep challenges, but especially with short naps, there's two main reasons that short naps happen. Okay, three. The first one is your child just isn't old enough to consolidate their daytime sleep. So that would
Mm.
be if a family comes to me and says their child is under about 4.5 to 5 months of age, like they're 14-week old, they're 4 month old. Oh, she'll only nap for 20 to 30 minutes at a time. The first thing I'm going to tell them is that's really developmentally normal. And even a child with fully independent sleep skills at 4 months of age will still probably only nap for 30 minutes. They
Yeah.
just aren't developmentally ready to consolidate their daytime sleep into longer naps until around 5 months of age for most children.
Mm.
Now, if we're over 5 months of age, like the parents you're talking about here, and your child will still only take short naps, there's usually two things that are happening. One is the wrong wake windows, and it's usually overtiredness. So I will often have a parent of a 5 month old call me and tell me that their child is up for like 2.5 to 3 hours, and then they'll put them down for a nap. And they'll only nap for 20 minutes. Your child went down overtired, will be my answer to that. And if a child goes down overtired, even though it sounds totally counterintuitive, you'd think they just pass out and have a big long sleep. The opposite happens. They have a lot of trouble getting in and staying in a nice, deep, restful sleep. They're agitated, they're overtired, they're overstimulated, and then they just wake up in every late stage of sleep and can't get back to sleep again. So
Mm.
look at your child's schedule. We have a lot of information on our website and on our Instagram page about wake windows. So try to educate yourself about what your child's age appropriate wake window is and try to stick with that, because if they get overtired, naps are often short. And then the other thing that's usually going on with short naps at this point is sleep props or sleep crutches.
Huh.
So that'll be like rocking to sleep, feeding to sleep, replacing a pacifier to go to sleep. I'm not saying any of these things are bad if you like to do that and it works for your family. I'm just answering the question, why is my baby having short naps? I rock him to sleep, I transfer him to his crib, and then he'll only sleep for 30 minutes. Probably what's happening for that baby is that around the 30 to 45-minute mark, when your baby ends his first sleep cycle and he's in a lighter stage of sleep, he's trying to transition to his next sleep cycle. But during that little transitional period, he's in that light stage of sleep and he wakes a little bit. He stirs, he rustles, his eyelids flutter, and a baby who goes into the crib for his nap fully awake and falls asleep using just his own sleep skills is just going to keep on sleeping at that 30-minute mark, or he's going to wake for a
Mhm.
second and then close his eyes and go back to sleep again. But a
Yeah.
baby who went into the crib already asleep, a baby who went to sleep in his parents' arms and got transferred to the crib, is going to wake up fully at that 30-minute mark and be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
How did I get in this crib? This is not where I fell asleep. I don't know how to fall asleep in this crib. I'm awake now and I have no concept of how to get back to sleep again. So I'm going to need you to rock me back to sleep again, or I'm just
Mhm.
done with this nap altogether. So that's often what's happening. And that's often when parents will come to us and say, okay, then I need a strategy for how do I manage things when I'm trying to put my baby in his crib awake and teach him how to fall asleep on his own so that when he's at that 30-minute mark, he can go back to sleep again. And
Yeah.
often once we do sleep coaching and baby has those independent sleep skills, that's when he can start having those longer naps.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So more so, because my mom used to always say like, "Oh, keep the baby up a little bit longer so they'll sleep longer." And I'm like, "No, no, no. Sleep breeds sleep. More sleep means more sleep, especially when they were
Like,
younger."
yeah, like many things that our wonderful and well-meaning older generation of parents tell us, this is not true. It's the opposite. And there's
Yeah,
so much stuff, and it's nobody's fault. It's education, it's time,
of
it's
course.
resources that we now have available to us, and it is a huge myth debunked over the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years, is that
Totally.
exhausting a baby is what's going to make them sleep better, and it is the complete opposite.
Yeah,
Getting them down before they get, I mean, we're not putting a 1-year-old down for a nap after he's been awake for an hour and expecting him to sleep. That's not what I'm talking about.
yeah,
I'm just saying that if we focus on age appropriate wake windows and we hit that right spot and we get baby down for a nap before they get overtired, they're much likely to have a better nap than if you just keep them up until they're screaming and exhausted and then expect them to have a big long nap.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for answering those questions.
For sure.
Erin, to end our podcast, normally I do some rapid fire. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just some fun rapid fire questions.
Okay. They better be fun.
So they are fun. Are you a night owl or a morning person?
I'm a morning person.
Oh, the sleep
Yeah,
coach
I
yourself.
am like an old lady goes to bed at 9:30 p.m. kind of
Oh
lady
my
and then gets up at
gosh.
6.
Amazing, amazing. Dream travel destination.
Oh my gosh, my husband and I travel a ton. That's really hard.
That's why I wanted to ask
Um,
you this one.
I've already been there, but I would go back to New Zealand because it's just like
Oh,
so amazing. I would go back and explore it more.
amazing.
Yeah.
Favorite musician or artist?
Ooh, Zach Brown band, I guess.
Ooh,
Yeah.
and guilty pleasure.
Oh my gosh, Ariana.
I know.
Um, oh, I'm so lame. I don't know. I'm so lame. I don't know. Da, da, da,
I
da,
can think of like
da.
100 for myself. Come on.
Can you? Come on, give me one
Yeah.
of yours then tell me and maybe it'll
Oh my gosh.
spark. What are your
Reality
guilty pleasures?
TV,
I don't
chips,
like.
chocolate.
Okay, I was gonna say ice cream. It just seemed way too obvious. Like
Oh,
ice
that's
cream, ice
good.
cream, ice cream. I'm an ice cream
Love.
girl. Like all the ice cream at any point. And my daughter will be like, "Can we go for ice cream?" And she always knows the answer. It's
Aw.
always yes. Like, it doesn't matter what time of day because she knows me, and she's like, "Mama will never say no." Okay, good.
The
Yes,
best.
that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Erin. Where can people find you and connect with you?
We have our website, thehappysleepcompany.com, Instagram at the Happy Sleep Company. Just reach out there. We have our own podcast. It's called Sleep Cues, the Everything. We just changed the name. It's always
Oh,
been called Sleep Cues. It's now called the Everything Parenting Podcast instead of the
oh,
Everything Baby Sleep Podcast because I talk to so many people like you and relationship experts and feeding experts. And it's about so much more than sleep because sleep isn't the single thing, right? Like it's about
mhm.
parenting and it's about all the things that help us to be better versions of ourselves and of parents. So I talk to a lot of different experts on there. So yeah, those are the main
Amazing.
places. And we do offer free 20-minute phone consultations. So if you're ever struggling with your baby's sleep and you're just like, I don't know what sleep coaching could or would or should look like, just reach out. We can have a free 20-minute chat and you can just get a better sense of what that might look like for your family.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Your Cup of Joy. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. And if this episode resonated with you, or if you've been loving this show, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening. Your support helps the podcast grow, it helps it reach more people, and it means the absolute world to me. So keep filling your cup with joy, and I will see you next week.